You don't need to do anything right now. You don't need to listen closely. And you don't need to understand every word that's being said. This moment isn't asking anything of you, and it won't test whether you're paying attention. If you're lying down, you can let your body stay exactly where it is. If you're sitting, that's fine too. There's no correct position, no posture to hold, and no effort required to be here. The day has already asked enough of you, again and again, and now it's over. Tonight isn't asking you to be productive or to hold yourself together. It isn't asking you to figure anything out or to make sense of what comes next. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. You might still feel the weight of the day in your body, in your shoulders, in your chest, or in the quiet space behind your eyes. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You don't have to release it yet, and you don't have to relax on command. You don't need to feel calm to be allowed to rest. Just noticing that you are here is enough. Your breathing can stay exactly as it is, without changing its rhythm or its depth. There's nothing you need to control about it, and nothing you need to improve. If thoughts come, let them come. If they drift away, let them drift. There's no need to follow them and no need to push them aside. Nothing needs your attention right now. The night has a different pace than the day. It moves slowly, without urgency, without explanations. It doesn't rush toward outcomes or demand answers. Tonight doesn't ask you to fix anything. You may notice a part of you that's still alert, still listening carefully, still checking whether something important is being missed. That part doesn't need to stand guard anymore. It doesn't have to stay ready. There's nothing urgent waiting for you here. You've already done enough for today. If your mind wanders, that's fine. If you lose track of these words, that's fine too. They're here, whether you follow them or not. This moment is simply a pause. A quiet space between what has already happened and whatever tomorrow may bring. And tomorrow can wait. For now, you're allowed to be unfinished, to not know, and to let things remain exactly as they are. You can let this rest. You don't need to check in with yourself right now. You don't need to see how relaxed you are or whether this is working. There's nothing to measure and nothing to get right in this moment. The night already knows how to slow things down. It doesn't hurry you, and it doesn't expect you to keep up. It simply holds space, quietly, without asking for explanations or effort. If the mind is still moving, that's natural. It's been moving all day. It doesn't need to stop suddenly. It can slow down in its own time, without being told to. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. You might notice small sounds around you, or the absence of sound. You might notice the weight of your body where it meets the bed or the chair. There's no need to focus on any of it. Just let it be part of the background, like the night itself. The day was full of moments that needed responses. This moment doesn't. It isn't waiting for clarity or understanding. It isn't asking you to decide what comes next. If thoughts return to unfinished things, that's okay. They don't need to be completed now. They don't need to be carried any further tonight. You can let them rest exactly where they are. You're not stepping away from responsibility by resting. You're simply pausing it. Everything that matters can wait until the morning, without being harmed by the pause. There's nothing fragile about letting go for a few hours. Nothing will fall apart because you're not holding it together right now. The night can carry what you don't need to. You may notice the edges of attention beginning to soften. You don't need to follow that sensation or encourage it. It can happen on its own, without guidance. Nothing needs your attention right now. If you're still listening, that's fine. If you begin to drift, that's fine too. You don't have to stay with the words. They can pass through, like quiet sounds in the distance. This moment isn't leading anywhere. It doesn't have a destination. It's simply here, steady and unhurried, giving you permission to be exactly as you are. You can let this rest. At some point, the night begins to feel closer than the day. Not suddenly, and not in a way you need to notice. It happens quietly, as the urgency of earlier hours fades into the background. You don't need to check whether you're still awake or already drifting. There's no line to cross and no moment to mark. The night doesn't require awareness to do its work. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. You may feel your attention soften, not focused on any one thing. Sounds become less important. Thoughts arrive with less detail, as if they're losing their edges. There's no need to follow that change or to encourage it. It can unfold on its own. The body knows how to settle when it's no longer being asked to respond. Muscles can release without instruction. Breathing can remain simple and unforced, moving at its own quiet pace. If fragments of the day appear, they don't need context. They don't need meaning. They can pass through as impressions without being organized or understood. Nothing needs your attention right now. You might notice the sense of time begin to blur. Minutes don't matter here. There's nowhere you're being led, and nothing you're expected to reach. This moment is complete, just as it is. The night doesn't rush you towards sleep. It doesn't require you to let go all at once. It allows rest to arrive gradually, in the background, without effort. You don't have to prepare for what comes next. You don't have to stay present or keep track of these words. They can fade in and out, like distant sounds, or without changing anything. Everything that felt unfinished earlier can remain unfinished for now. It doesn't need to be carried forward. It doesn't need to be remembered. It can wait, quietly, without being held. You can let this rest. If you're still listening, that's fine. If you begin to drift, that's fine too. The night is steady either way, holding space without asking for anything in return. This is simply the edge of the night, where effort falls away and nothing new is required. You don't need to do anything to stay here. You can let the quiet take over, gently and without direction. There was a quiet evening, not different from many others. Nothing remarkable happened, and nothing needed to be remembered. The light was low, the air felt still, and the day had already loosened its grip. Someone was there, moving slowly through the end of the day, not in a hurry, not fully at rest either, just present, without needing to name what they were feeling. The room held the soft traces of what had already happened. Conversations that were over, thoughts that had lost their urgency. Outside, the night had settled into its usual rhythm. It didn't announce itself. It simply arrived, as it always does, without asking whether anyone was ready. Nothing needed to be solved tonight. The person paused for a moment. Not to think, but simply because there was nowhere else to go. The day had reached its edge. Whatever had been unfinished remained unfinished, and whatever answers had not appeared still hadn't come. There was a familiar impulse to go back over things, to replay moments, to wonder if something could have been done differently. That impulse didn't feel strong, just present, like a habit that hadn't realized it could rest. The night didn't resist it, and it didn't encourage it either. It allowed it to be there, quietly, without consequence. Time moved differently here. Minutes stretched without needing to be filled. The space between one thought and the next grew wider, softer, less defined. Nothing was being prepared for, and nothing was being avoided. The person noticed how little was actually required in this moment. No decisions, no explanations, no effort to make sense of what would come next. Nothing needed their attention right now.
The room felt steady, holding everything without comment. The night outside continued its slow movement, unconcerned with outcomes, unconcerned with clarity. It didn't ask for understanding. It didn't ask for resolution. There was a sense, faint but present, that things could be left exactly where they were, not abandoned.
Just sit down for a while. The weight of the day didn't disappear, but it no longer needed to be carried. The night made space for that. And in that space, without intention or instruction, the need to hold everything together began to soften. Not all at once, and not completely, just enough to allow the moment to settle. You can let this rest. The evening stayed quiet, as if it had no intention of changing. Nothing arrived to interrupt it, and nothing needed to be completed before it could end. The air felt settled, holding the moment exactly as it was. The person remained there, not waiting for anything in particular. There was no sense of progress or delay, only the gentle feeling of time passing without direction. Thoughts came and went in fragments without forming a clear line. They didn't ask to be followed. Nothing needed to be solved tonight. There had been other evenings like this before, moments when the world seemed to loosen its structure and allow things to remain unfinished. At first, that space had felt uncomfortable, like something important was being missed. But now, it felt familiar, almost neutral, as if it had always been available. The mind noticed the absence of urgency. No messages needed replies. No decisions needed to be made. Whatever had not worked itself out during the day did not become clearer by being revisited here. The night seemed to understand this. It did not offer answers, and it did not ask questions. It simply stayed present, unchanging, giving no signals to hurry or to hold on. Attention softened further, no longer anchored to any single thought. Memories passed without detail.
Plans lost their edges. Even the idea of time felt less precise, less important. Nothing needed their attention right now. There was a quiet realization, not formed into words. That effort could pause here without consequence. The world did not collapse when it wasn't being managed. Things continued on their own, steady and intact.
The weight that had been carried earlier was still there, but it no longer pressed in the same way. It rested where it was, supported by the night, without needing to be held. The room remained unchanged, and that constancy felt reassuring. Nothing moved toward resolution, and nothing needed to. The moment did not ask to be understood. Without deciding to do so, the person allowed the day to remain incomplete. Not as a failure, but simply as a condition of being human. The night accepted that without comment. You can let this rest. As the night continued, the sense of separation grew thinner. It was no longer clear where the evening ended and where the person began. Everything felt part of the same quiet movement, unhurried and without direction. There was nothing special happening, and that felt important in a way that didn't need to be explained. The moment didn't stand out. It didn't ask to be remembered later. It simply existed, complete without needing meaning. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The person no longer felt like they were waiting for something to change. The idea of waiting had softened, losing its urgency. Whatever answers had not appeared earlier did not feel farther away. They simply felt unnecessary for now. Thoughts still arrived, but they did so gently, like distant sounds rather than conversations that needed replies. They didn't stay long enough to take shape. They didn't carry instructions or demands. Nothing needed their attention right now. There was a subtle shift, barely noticeable, where effort began to fade on its own. Not because of a decision, and not because something had been understood, but because holding on no longer felt required. The night seemed to support that release without comment. It didn't promise rest, and it didn't explain what would happen next. It simply remained steady, allowing everything to settle in its own time. The idea of control felt less relevant here. Not challenged, not rejected, just distant. There was no need to manage the moment or to guide it toward a conclusion. It was enough to let it unfold exactly as it was. The room, the air, the quiet presence of the night all remained unchanged. That constancy made it easier to stop checking, easier to stop evaluating how things were going. Whatever had felt unfinished earlier could remain that way. It didn't need to be carried forward or resolved before rest was allowed. It could stay exactly where it was, without consequence. You can let this rest. If the story still feels present, that's fine. If it begins to blur, that's fine too. It isn't important to know where it goes from here. The night doesn't require direction, and neither do you. Everything can stay just as it is, held gently by the quiet, without effort and without expectation. By now, the story doesn't belong to anyone in particular. It no longer needs a setting or a sequence of events. It exists as a feeling, quiet and familiar, like something you've known without ever needing to explain. There are moments like this, when nothing specific is happening, yet something important is taking place beneath the surface. Not a realization, not a conclusion, just a gentle loosening of what had been held too tightly. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. You might notice how often the mind reaches for something to work on, something to complete. It's a habit learned over time, not a problem that needs fixing. And for now, that habit doesn't need to be followed. The night doesn't reward effort. It doesn't respond to analysis or planning. It simply allows things to slow down when they're no longer being pushed forward. Nothing needs your attention right now. Sometimes, rest begins not when everything is finished, but when the need to finish everything fades. The body understands this before the mind does. It settles quietly, without asking permission, without waiting for certainty. Thoughts may still appear, but they feel lighter here. They don't ask for answers. They don't insist on being understood. They pass through like distant impressions, leaving no trace behind. The idea that something must be done before rest can happen begins to lose its grip. Not because it was wrong, but because it no longer applies to this moment. You don't need to keep track of where you are in the story. You don't need to remember what came before. The night holds everything gently, without asking you to participate. If attention drifts, let it drift. If these words fade into the background, that's exactly where they belong. They aren't meant to lead you anywhere. You can let this rest. There's nothing fragile about this pause. Nothing will be lost by allowing the moment to remain open and unfinished. The night has room for that, and so do you. This is where the story dissolves completely. Not into silence, but into the quiet space where nothing is required. You don't need to do anything to stay here. The night will take care of the rest. At some point, the story no longer feels important. It doesn't end in a clear way, and it doesn't need to. It simply drifts into the background, like a thought that loses its reason for staying. The night continues in the same quiet way it has all along. Nothing signals a change, and nothing asks you to notice that anything is different. The voice is still here, steady and unhurried, moving at the same pace as before. You don't need to remember what was just said. You don't need to follow where it might be going next. The story has already done what it needed to do, and now it can remain somewhere behind you without asking to be carried further. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't arrive with the same shape they had earlier. They come in fragments, loosely formed, and they don't insist on being completed. Some of them fade before they make sense. And that doesn't matter. The night doesn't correct any of this. It doesn't slow things down on purpose. And it doesn't push them forward either. It simply keeps the same rhythm, allowing everything else to adjust on its own. You might notice that listening feels different now. Not clearer, and not more focused, just softer. The words don't stand out as much, and they don't need to. They can pass through in the same way other quiet sounds do, without requiring a response. Nothing here needs to be held in place. There's no need to stay with any particular idea, and no need to let go of one either. Whatever remains can remain, and whatever fades can fade. The voice continues. Not to guide you anywhere, and not to explain anything new. It's simply part of the night now, moving along with it, steady and unobtrusive. And if your attention drifts away for a moment, that's fine. If it comes back briefly and then drifts again, that's fine too. There's no point you're meant to reach, and no moment you're meant to catch. The night has plenty of room for all of this, and it isn't in a hurry. After a while, listening doesn't feel like something you're doing anymore. It happens on its own, without intention, without the sense that you need to stay with it. The voice keeps moving at the same pace, and you don't need to adjust to it. The night holds everything at an even distance. Sounds don't come closer, and they don't drift away. They simply exist in the same space, without asking to be sorted or understood. You may notice that thoughts no longer form complete sentences. They appear in pieces, loosely connected, and then move on before they settle into anything clear. There's no reason to follow them, and no reason to stop them either. Nothing here needs to be organized. The voice doesn't try to capture your attention. It isn't pointing anything out, and it isn't leading you toward a conclusion. It stays present in the same quiet way, allowing you to come and go without interruption. Moments pass without being marked. There's no sense of how long you've been listening, and no need to know how much time remains. The night isn't keeping track, and you don't need to either. If attention drifts away completely for a moment, the voice continues. If it returns briefly, the voice is still there, unchanged. There's no difference between those moments, and no need to choose one over the other. The night moves at its own pace, and everything else follows naturally. There's nothing to catch up to, and nothing falling behind. Whatever is present is enough, without needing to be named. You don't need to remember any of this. The words don't depend on being held, and they don't lose anything when they pass by unnoticed. They can remain part of the background, like the quiet sounds of the night itself. Nothing here asks for effort, There's no task to complete and no state to reach. The voice remains steady, and the night remains open, giving you plenty of room to rest wherever you are. And if listening fades into something less defined, that's fine too. The night isn't waiting for clarity. It's simply here, continuing in the same gentle way, without needing anything in return. Over time, thoughts begin to change their shape. They don't disappear, and they don't stop arriving, but they no longer feel sharp or clearly defined. They come without urgency, without the sense that they need to be finished. Some thoughts start and then trail off halfway through. Others appear briefly and fade before they form into anything recognizable. There's no need to make sense of them, and no reason to follow where they might have gone. The night doesn't respond to this shift. It doesn't signal that anything special is happening. It keeps the same quiet pace, allowing thoughts to soften on their own. The voice continues in the same way, steady and unchanging. It doesn't interrupt the flow of thinking, and it doesn't encourage it either. It simply stays present, giving the night a consistent rhythm to move along with. You might notice that ideas no longer stand apart from one another. They blend together more easily, losing their boundaries. One thought fades, and another appears, without a clear break in between. Nothing needs to be sorted or resolved. There's no need to decide whether a thought matters or not. They don't require attention, and they don't ask to be dismissed. They can pass through in whatever way they choose. The night feels wide enough to hold all of this without effort. There's room for unfinished ideas, half-formed impressions, and quiet pauses where nothing seems to happen at all. Listening remains easy, almost incidental. The words move through the space without demanding focus, and they don't linger long enough to become important. They're simply part of what's happening, like the rest of the night. Time continues without markers. There's no sense of when one moment ends and the next begins. Everything flows together, gently and without definition. If attention drifts, the voice continues. If attention returns briefly, it meets the same steady presence. Nothing changes, and nothing needs to. The night carries on in this way, unhurried and open, letting thoughts soften further as they pass, without needing anything from you. At a certain point, time no longer feels like something that needs to be measured. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes less specific, less concerned with before and after. Moments pass without drawing attention to themselves. There's no clear sense of how long you've been here, and no need to know. The night isn't keeping count, and nothing depends on the exact moment you're in. Everything moves forward gently, without asking to be noticed. The voice continues at the same pace, unchanged. It doesn't mock the passing of time or point out transitions. It simply remains present, allowing the night to unfold in its own quiet way. Thoughts may still come and go, but they don't seem connected to any schedule. They aren't tied to what just happened or what might happen next. They appear, linger briefly, and then fade, without leaving a sense of progress or delay. You might notice that waiting no longer feels relevant. There's nothing you're waiting for, and nothing that needs to arrive. The night feels complete without needing to move toward anything else. Listening remains effortless. The words don't signal beginnings or endings. They don't suggest that something is about to change. They pass through steadily, like the rest of the night will, without creating a sense of direction. Time stretches softly,
Not in a way that feels long, and not in a way that feels short. It simply opens, allowing everything to exist without being arranged. There's no pressure to keep track of it. If attention drifts away from the idea of time altogether, that's natural. If it briefly returns, it finds the same calm rhythm waiting. Nothing has moved ahead, and nothing has fallen behind. The night continues in this open way, unhurried and unconcerned. Time no longer asks questions, and it doesn't require answers. It's simply there, moving quietly alongside everything else. And the voice remains, steady and familiar, not guiding you anywhere, just continuing as the night continues, without needing to mark where you are. After a while, there's no clear sense that anything needs to settle into a specific spot. Thoughts don't look for the right place to land, and attention doesn't need to decide where it belongs. Everything can remain exactly where it is, without being arranged. The night holds things loosely. Sounds don't ask to be placed in the foreground or the background. They appear, exist for a moment, and then move on, without leaving a space behind them. Nothing needs to be kept nearby, and nothing needs to be moved away. The voice continues in the same steady way, not drawing lines between one moment and the next. It doesn't suggest where you should be focused, and it doesn't ask you to stay with any particular part of what's being said. Thoughts may still pass through, but they don't feel like they need a container. They aren't trying to fit into a sequence or build towards something else. They come as they are, and then they leave, without needing a destination. You might notice that attention no longer searches for a resting point. It doesn't pause to decide whether it should stay here or move somewhere else. It simply drifts, lightly and without effort, touching one thing and then another, or nothing in particular. There's no need to organize what's happening. Nothing needs to be placed in order, and nothing needs to be separated. The night feels wide enough to hold everything without boundaries. Listening remains easy. The words don't ask to be collected or remembered. They pass through as part of the same open space, without claiming importance. There's no difference between what stays and what fades. If something briefly feels closer, it can be close. If it fades into the background, it can fade. There's no need to choose between them. The night doesn't prefer one over the other. The voice stays present, not anchoring anything in place, just continuing alongside the night. And nothing needs a position to rest in, and nothing needs to be moved to make room. Everything can remain as it is, without being held or set down. The night carries it all evenly, without asking where anything belongs. At a certain moment, the night begins to feel even, not flat and not empty, just balanced in a way that doesn't call attention to itself. Nothing stands out more than anything else, and nothing fades far enough to disappear. The voice continues at the same steady pace, without rising or falling. It doesn't try to highlight a moment or soften another. It simply stays level, moving along with the night as it is. Sounds blend into one another. A sound that appears doesn't feel closer or farther away than the quiet around it. It becomes part of the same texture, briefly present, then gently absorbed back into the background. Thoughts move in the same way. They don't arrive with urgency, and they don't carry extra weight. One thought doesn't feel more important than the next. They pass through evenly, without asking to be separated or compared. You might notice that nothing feels out of place. There's no sense that something is missing, and no sense that something needs to be added. The night feels complete without effort, holding everything at the same distance. Listening remains simple. The words don't pull attention forward.
And they don't leave gaps behind. They pass through steadily, without creating a sense of contrast. There's no part you need to wait for, and no part you need to stay with. Time moves without emphasis. It doesn't slow down or speed up. It doesn't stretch or compress. It simply continues, quietly, without marking itself. If attention drifts, it drifts evenly. If it settles briefly, it settles without preference. There's no reason to adjust or respond. Everything stays balanced on its own. The night holds this evenness naturally. Nothing needs to be corrected, and nothing needs to be guided. The voice remains part of that balance.
Steady and unchanging, continuing alongside the night. And as everything stays level, there's nothing to follow and nothing to resist. The night feels even, and it stays that way, quietly, carrying everything forward without asking for anything in return. As the night continues, thinking doesn't disappear, but it becomes lighter.
It feels less like a process and more like a background movement, something that passes through without asking to be followed. The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace. It doesn't introduce anything new or draw attention to what's happening. It simply continues, allowing the night to keep its rhythm. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't stay long enough to take form. They come without a beginning and leave without an ending. There's no clear point where one thought replaces another. They blend together, then thin out again. Nothing here needs to be understood. The night doesn't respond to these changes. It doesn't slow things down or speed them up. It keeps the same quiet flow, letting everything soften on its own. Listening feels even less intentional now. You don't have to stay with the words, and you don't have to drift away from them either. They can be present without being noticed, like sounds that fade in and out of the distance. Time doesn't feel sharp. It doesn't move in steps or segments. It feels smooth, continuous, without edges to mark where one moment ends and the next begins. If attention moves toward a thought for a moment, it doesn't stay there. If it moves away, nothing is lost. There's no difference between those moments, and no need to choose one over the other. The night feels open enough to hold all of this without effort. There's room for quiet gaps where nothing seems to be happening, and room for gentle movement when something passes through. The voice continues as part of that openness. It doesn't guide or reassure. It doesn't ask you to notice anything in particular. It simply remains steady and familiar, moving alongside the night. And as thinking softens further, there's no need to check where you are or how far you've come. Nothing depends on that. The night continues evenly, and the voice continues with it, without asking anything of you. As the night moves on, thoughts stop forming complete shapes. They don't connect the way they used to. One idea appears, then loosens, and another drifts through without clearly taking its place. Nothing feels unfinished because nothing is trying to become whole. The voice continues at the same pace, steady and even. It doesn't react to the shifting patterns of thought. It stays present in the same quiet way, allowing everything else to soften around it. Thoughts no longer gather themselves into sequences. They don't line up or point toward anything else. They come in fragments, briefly present, then gently dissolve before they can settle into meaning. There's no need to follow where they might have been going. They aren't leading anywhere. Listening remains simple. The words don't invite attention, and they don't fade completely either. They stay in the background,
moving along without asking to be noticed. Time continues without structure. It doesn't divide itself into moments that need to be marked. Everything feels smooth and uninterrupted, as if the night is moving in one continuous motion. If attention drifts toward a thought, it doesn't stay long enough to attach. If it drifts away, nothing changes. There's no difference between holding and letting go because nothing is being held in the first place. The night feels wide and unbroken. There's space for thoughts to appear and disappear without consequence. There's no pressure to make sense of them or to keep them together. The voice remains part of that openness. It doesn't explain what's happening, and it doesn't ask you to notice the changes. It simply continues, giving the night a steady presence to move alongside. As thoughts lose their ability to hold together, there's no sense of loss, and nothing important is slipping away. The night carries everything evenly, without asking anything to stay or to leave. And the voice stays with the night, unchanged and unhurried, continuing in the same calm way, allowing thoughts to pass freely, without needing to form or remain. After a while, attention no longer feels like it's looking for anything. It doesn't move around to check what matters, and it doesn't pause to decide where it should stay. It simply exists, without direction, without intention. The voice continues at the same steady pace, unchanged. It doesn't call attention forward, and it doesn't pull it back. It stays present in the same quiet way, allowing attention to rest wherever it happens to be. Nothing here needs to be found. Attention may still drift from one sensation to another, but it doesn't feel like movement anymore. It feels more like a gentle settling, as if there's no difference between arriving and leaving. Sounds pass through without being sorted. A sound doesn't feel closer or farther, more important or less. It appears, blends into the quiet, and then fades again, without leaving a trace. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't invite attention to follow them. They don't present themselves as questions or problems. They come and go without creating a sense that something needs to be noticed. The night doesn't respond to this change. It keeps the same calm rhythm, neither encouraging attention to stay alert nor asking it to let go. Everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. Listening remains effortless. The words don't ask for focus and they don't disappear completely. They move through steadily, like the rest of the night, and without signaling that anything needs to happen next. There's no reason to stay alert and no reason to drift away. Attention doesn't have to choose between them. It can remain loose and undefined without needing a place to rest. Time continues without emphasis. It doesn't gather attention or pull it forward. Moments pass quietly, without announcing themselves or asking to be counted. The voice remains part of this steady flow. It doesn't explain what's happening, and it doesn't suggest that anything has changed. It simply continues alongside the night, allowing attention to stop searching and settle into its own natural stillness. As the night continues, nothing seems to stand out more than anything else. A sound doesn't rise above the quiet, and the quiet doesn't push sounds away. Everything shares the same space. Without competing for attention, the voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't emphasize one moment over another, and it doesn't suggest where attention should go. It simply stays present, allowing everything else to remain equal. Thoughts may appear, but they don't arrive with urgency. One thought doesn't feel more important than the next. They pass through without drawing focus, blending into the same gentle flow as everything around them.
Attention doesn't need to decide what to listen to. It doesn't move toward what seems louder or away from what seems quieter. It stays open, without preference, without sorting. The night feels balanced. There's no foreground and no background that needs to be chosen. Sounds, sensations, and the space between them all exist at the same level, without asking to be noticed first. Listening remains easy. The words don't compete with the quiet, and the quiet doesn't swallow the words. They move together, evenly, without creating contrast or tension. Time continues without pressure. Moments don't rush past, and they don't linger. They pass in the same calm way, without asking to be marked or remembered. If attention drifts briefly towards something, it doesn't stay there. If it drifts away, nothing changes. There's no sense that something has been missed, and no sense that something needs to be found. The night holds everything without preference. Nothing is highlighted, and nothing is pushed aside. Everything is allowed to remain exactly as it is, without being compared or ranked. The voice continues alongside this evenness, not pointing anything out, not guiding attention. It stays present in the same quiet way, allowing nothing to compete for notice as the night carries everything forward, evenly and without effort. As the night settles further, the sense of distance begins to soften. Things no longer feel close or far in any meaningful way. A sound doesn't seem nearer than the quiet around it, and the quiet doesn't feel farther away than the sound. The voice continues at the same steady pace, without leaning toward anything in particular. It doesn't come closer, and it doesn't drift away. It remains present in the same even way, allowing everything else to share the same space. Attention doesn't move toward what feels nearer, and it doesn't pull back from what feels distant. It stays open, without measuring how close or far anything might be. Everything feels evenly placed, without needing to be adjusted. Thoughts pass through with the same quality. One thought doesn't feel closer to you than another. They don't approach or retreat. They appear briefly, then dissolve back into the same open space, without changing the sense of distance. The night feels wide and level. There's no center that draws things in, and no edge that pushes them away. Everything exists together, without layers or depth that need to be noticed. Listening remains simple. The words don't come towards you, and they don't recede into the background.
They move along at the same distance as everything else, steady and unremarkable. Time continues without perspective. Moments don't feel near or far from one another. They pass evenly, without compressing or stretching, without creating a sense of approach or departure. If attention rests on something briefly,
it doesn't feel closer. If it moves on, nothing feels farther away. There's no shift that needs to be tracked, and no position that needs to be held. The night holds all of this without effort. Sounds, thoughts, sensations, and the quiet between them remain at the same distance, sharing the same gentle presence. The voice continues alongside this evenness, unchanged and unhurried. Nothing moves closer. Nothing falls away. Everything stays where it is, and everything feels equally distant as the night carries it all forward, calmly and without distinction. As the night continues, everything begins to feel the same in a quiet, even way. There are no parts that stand out and no parts that fade away. The night doesn't change its tone or texture. It remains consistent, without drawing attention to itself. The voice continues at the same steady pace, neither rising nor falling. It doesn't signal emphasis, and it doesn't soften away. It stays present in a simple, uniform way, moving along with the night as it is. Sounds blend into a single layer. One sound doesn't feel separate from another, and the quiet between them doesn't feel like a gap. Everything merges into the same steady presence without contrast. Thoughts move in the same way. They don't arrive with different weights or tones. One thought doesn't feel heavier or lighter than another. They pass through evenly without creating a sense of variation. Attention doesn't shift between levels anymore. It doesn't move from foreground to background or from one layer to another. It stays open and level without needing to adjust. The night feels smooth and uninterrupted. There are no edges to notice and no transitions to mark. Everything flows together, quietly and consistently. Listening remains effortless. The words don't change their distance or their tone. They don't become clearer or more distant. They remain part of the same uniform space. Steady and unobtrusive. Time continues without texture. Moments don't feel different from one another. They don't stack or separate. They pass in the same gentle way, without forming a pattern that needs to be noticed. If attention rests somewhere briefly, it doesn't create emphasis. If it drifts, nothing changes. There's no variation to respond to and no difference to track. The night holds everything evenly. Sounds, thoughts, sensations, and the quiet itself share the same quality, the same presence. Nothing stands apart and nothing needs to. The voice continues alongside this uniformity, unchanged and unhurried. The night feels even from moment to moment, and it stays that way, carrying everything forward in the same calm, consistent flow. As the night continues, the voice no longer feels separate from what surrounds it. It doesn't stand out as something to listen to, and it doesn't fade into the distance either. It simply exists within the same space as everything else. The words move through the night without direction. They don't arrive from anywhere in particular, and they don't leave a trace behind them. They pass through in the same way the quiet does, without asking to be noticed. You may not always be aware of when the voice begins or ends, and no, it doesn't mark itself clearly. It blends into the background, becoming part of the same steady presence as the night itself. Sounds and silence feel less distinct now. The voice doesn't interrupt the quiet, and the quiet doesn't interrupt the voice. They share the same rhythm, the same gentle flow, without competing or separating. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't attach themselves to the words. They drift independently, without pulling attention toward the voice or away from it. Everything moves alongside everything else, evenly. Listening no longer feels like an action. There's no sense of turning toward the sound or away from it. The voice is simply there, woven into the night, without requiring effort or response. Time continues in the same smooth way. The voice doesn't signal moments passing, and it doesn't anchor you to where you are. It remains present without measuring anything, allowing time to remain undefined. If attention rests on the voice briefly, it doesn't create focus. If attention moves away, nothing is lost. The voice continues in the same way, unaffected, steady, and unobtrusive. The night feels wide enough to hold the voice without giving it a place of its own. It becomes part of the atmosphere,
like the quiet air or the distant sounds that come and go. As everything settles into this shared space, the voice remains, not guiding, not leading, simply continuing as the night continues. It no longer needs to be listened to, and it doesn't need to fade. It stays evenly as part of the night itself. As the night deepens,
words no longer feel separate from one another. They don't arrive as individual pieces that need to be noticed or held. They move together, softly, without clear edges between them. The voice continues at the same steady pace, unchanged. It doesn't pause to emphasize one word over another, and it doesn't slow down to create space. Everything flows evenly, without distinction. Words no longer feel like markers. They don't point to ideas that need to be followed, and they don't suggest meaning that needs to be gathered. They pass through as a continuous presence, blending into the same quiet movement as the night.
You may not notice where one sentence ends and the next begins. They don't separate themselves clearly. They drift into one another, forming a gentle stream rather than distinct shapes. Listening remains effortless. There's no sense of choosing which words to attend to and which to ignore. They don't stand out enough to invite focus,
and they don't disappear enough to leave gaps. Thoughts may still pass alongside the words, but they don't attach themselves to them. A thought doesn't follow a sentence, and a sentence doesn't spark a thought. They exist independently, sharing the same space without intersecting. The night holds all of this evenly. Words, thoughts, sounds, and the quiet between them don't compete or separate. They remain part of a single, steady layer, without hierarchy. Time continues without being marked by language. The voice doesn't signal progress or change. It doesn't indicate where you are or how far you've gone. It simply continues, allowing time to remain open and unstructured. If attention drifts across the word, it doesn't linger. If it moves away, nothing is lost. The words don't require attention to continue, and they don't lose anything when they pass unnoticed. But the voice remains part of the night, and the words remain part of the voice. Nothing stands apart, and nothing needs to. Everything flows together quietly, as the night carries it all forward in the same calm, uninterrupted way. As the night continues, meaning no longer gathers itself around the words. The sentences still move along, but they don't settle into ideas that need to be understood. They pass through without assembling into anything complete. The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace. It doesn't slow to clarify or pause to explain. It continues evenly, allowing the words to exist without asking them to become something more. Words no longer point toward meaning.
They don't connect into concepts or suggest conclusions. They arrive, blend into the flow, and move on without forming structures that need to be followed. You may notice that understanding doesn't feel necessary anymore. The words don't ask to be interpreted, and they don't invite reflection. They remain present as sound,
moving through the night without shaping thought. Thoughts may still appear nearby, but they don't organize themselves around the words. A thought doesn't take hold of a sentence, and a sentence doesn't give rise to a thought. They pass alongside one another without meeting. Listening becomes lighter. There's no effort to grasp what's being said, and no sense of losing something when meaning doesn't appear. The words continue whether they're understood or not. The night holds this gently. It doesn't require clarity, and it doesn't respond to confusion. Everything moves forward in the same quiet way, without needing to resolve into sense.
Time continues without being shaped by meaning. Moments don't build on one another. They don't lead anywhere. They simply pass, smooth and unmarked. If attention rests briefly on the sound of the words, it doesn't turn into focus. If attention moves away, nothing changes. The voice continues, unaffected, steady and unobtrusive.
As meaning stops forming, there's no sense of absence. Nothing has been taken away. The words remain. The voice remains. And the night remains. All moving together without asking to be understood, carrying everything forward in the same calm, open way. As the night continues, listening no longer feels connected to understanding. There's no sense that the words need to make sense or form ideas in order to be heard. They move through without asking to be interpreted. The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace. It doesn't pause to clarify or shift to invite attention. It continues evenly, allowing listening to happen without effort.
You may notice that there's no longer a need to follow what's being said. The words don't lead anywhere, and they don't leave behind questions. They exist simply as sound, passing through the same space as everything else. Understanding doesn't arrive, and it doesn't feel absent either. It just isn't needed.
The night doesn't ask for it, and the words don't depend on it. They continue whether they're understood or not. Thoughts may still drift nearby, but they don't try to connect with the words. A thought doesn't respond to a sentence, and a sentence doesn't shape a thought. They move independently, without meeting or forming patterns. Listening becomes passive, almost incidental. There's no sense of choosing to listen or choosing not to. The sound is there, and that's enough. Nothing needs to be done with it. Time continues without structure. The voice doesn't mark progress or signal change. It doesn't suggest that something has been completed or that
Something new is beginning. It simply remains steady and unobtrusive. If attention rests on the sound briefly, it doesn't turn into focus. If it moves away, nothing is lost. The sound continues, unchanged, without needing to be received. The night holds all of this quietly. There's no need for understanding to arrive,
and no need for it to leave. Listening doesn't require meaning, and meaning doesn't need to appear. The voice stays present as part of the night, continuing in the same calm way. Words pass, sounds pass, and listening happens on its own, without effort and without the need to understand anything at all. As the night settles further, the difference between sound and silence begins to fade. A sound doesn't interrupt the quiet, and the quiet doesn't replace the sound. They feel like two expressions of the same calm presence. The voice continues at the same steady pace,
unchanged. It doesn't fill the silence, and it doesn't stand apart from it. It moves alongside the quiet, sharing the same space without contrast. You may notice that silence no longer feels empty. It doesn't wait for sound to arrive, and it doesn't signal that something is missing. It feels complete on its own.
Just as sound does when it appears. Sounds pass through gently, without drawing attention. They don't rise above the quiet or fall away from it. They blend in, then move on, leaving the same calm space behind. Listening doesn't shift when a sound appears or when it fades. There's no need to adjust or respond. Everything remains even, without preference for sound or silence. The night holds both in the same way. There's no foreground and no background. Sound and silence share the same level, without competing or taking turns. Thoughts, if they arise, follow the same pattern. They don't feel louder than the quiet, and they don't fade more deeply into it.
They pass through evenly, without changing the balance. Time continues without emphasis. Moments don't feel marked by sound or defined by silence. Everything flows together smoothly, without interruption. The voice remains part of this balance. It doesn't announce itself when it speaks, and it doesn't disappear when there's
quiet around it. It stays present in the same unobtrusive way, moving along with the night. as sound and silence feel the same. There's nothing to listen for and nothing to wait for. Everything that appears belongs, and everything that fades leaves the same calm space behind. The night carries it all evenly, without distinction, continuing in the same gentle, uninterrupted flow. As the night continues, it no longer feels like anything is changing. Not because movement has stopped, but because change no longer stands out. Everything feels settled into the same quiet rhythm, steady and uninterrupted. The voice continues in the same even way. It doesn't signal a shift, and it doesn't mark a moment of arrival. It remains present, moving along without drawing attention to itself. Nothing feels like it's beginning or ending. A moment doesn't replace the one before it, and nothing seems to follow after. The night feels consistent, holding the same shape from one breath to the next. Sounds, when they appear, don't alter the atmosphere. They don't introduce something new, and they don't fade into something different. They pass through and leave the night exactly as it was. Thoughts may still drift by, but they don't bring a sense of movement with them. One thought doesn't feel like a change from the last. They pass without shifting the balance, leaving the same calm space behind. Listening remains effortless. The words don't create progression or signal direction. They continue steadily, without suggesting that anything needs to happen next. Time feels smooth and unbroken. It doesn't stretch or compress. It doesn't move forward in steps. It simply continues, quietly, without calling attention to itself. If attention rests somewhere briefly, nothing changes. If it drifts away, nothing changes either. The night doesn't respond differently. Everything remains even, without preference. The voice stays part of this steady presence. It doesn't guide or reassure. It doesn't fade or sharpen. It remains, unchanged, moving alongside the night. As the night no longer changes, there's nothing to wait for and nothing to notice. Everything that needs to be here is already here. The night continues in the same calm way. And the voice continues with it, steady and unhurried, without marking any difference at all. As the night continues, nothing announces that it has moved into something new. There's no signal that a moment has ended, and no sign that another has begun. Everything carries on in the same quiet way, without drawing attention to itself. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't introduce a new direction, and it doesn't close off what came before. It simply continues, allowing the night to remain exactly as it is. There's no sense of transition here. One moment doesn't feel different from the next. The night doesn't present landmarks or markers. It moves smoothly, without indicating that anything needs to be noticed. Sounds pass through, without signaling arrival. When they fade, they don't leave behind a gap. The quiet that follows feels the same as the quiet before, uninterrupted and even. Thoughts may still drift by, but they don't suggest change. One thought doesn't replace another. They pass through without creating contrast, leaving the same calm space behind. Listening remains passive. The words don't cue attention to wake or settle. They don't suggest that something is about to happen. They remain present, steady, and unobtrusive. Time continues without announcing itself. It doesn't speed up or slow down. It doesn't offer a sense of progress or pause. It simply flows quietly and consistently. If attention rests briefly on the sound of the voice, nothing shifts. If it moves away, nothing shifts either. The night doesn't respond differently. Everything remains even and undisturbed. The voice stays part of this continuity. It doesn't guide you from one place to another. It doesn't reassure or instruct. It simply remains, moving alongside the night as it continues without signaling any change. As nothing signals a shift, there's no reason to anticipate what comes next. The night carries on in the same calm way, and the voice carries on with it, steady and familiar, without marking any difference from one moment to the next. As the night goes on, the sense of flow remains unbroken. There's no moment where it stops or starts again. It continues in the same quiet way,
without interruption or pause. The voice keeps the same steady pace. It doesn't slow to mark a moment, and it doesn't rise to introduce anything new. It moves along smoothly, without creating edges in the night. Nothing interrupts the rhythm. A sound may appear briefly, but it doesn't disrupt what's already there. When it fades,
the flow continues exactly as it was, unchanged. Thoughts pass through without cutting the stream. They don't arrive sharply, and they don't leave behind gaps. One thought dissolves into the next, and the night remains even throughout. Listening doesn't shift. There's no sense of tuning in more closely or drifting away completely. The voice stays present in the same unobtrusive way, and attention doesn't need to respond. Time moves without segments. It doesn't break itself into parts that need to be noticed. Moments follow one another seamlessly, without a sense of separation. If attention rests briefly on the words, it doesn't create a pause in the flow. If attention moves elsewhere, the flow continues all the same. Nothing depends on where attention happens to be. The night feels continuous, one without gaps or transitions. Everything that appears becomes part of the same stream, and everything that fades leaves the stream intact. The voice remains part of this continuity. It doesn't guide the flow or comment on it. It simply stays present, moving along as the night moves along, steady and unbroken. As the flow doesn't break, there's nothing to adjust and nothing to anticipate. The night carries everything forward in one smooth motion, and the voice carries on with it, unchanged and uninterrupted. As the night continues, nothing reaches out to pull attention away. There's no sound that rises sharply enough to interrupt, and no quiet that feels empty enough to demand notice. Everything remains evenly placed within the same calm flow. The voice continues at the same steady pace. It doesn't call for attention, and it doesn't fade into the background. It stays present without asking to be followed, allowing attention to remain where it already is. Nothing here feels urgent. A thought doesn't appear with enough force to take over, and a sensation doesn't linger long enough to become important. They pass through gently, without drawing focus away from the steady rhythm of the night. Attention doesn't need to return to anything. It doesn't have to be gathered back or redirected. It remains loose, open, without being pulled in any direction. The night holds this evenly. Sounds, when they appear, don't compete with the quiet. When they fade, they don't leave a gap that needs to be filled. Everything continues without interruption. Listening remains passive. The words don't demand engagement, and they don't disappear. They move through at the same level as everything else, without becoming a point of focus. Time passes without drawing attention forward. Moments don't signal arrival or departure. They simply continue, quietly and consistently, without pulling attention along with them. If attention drifts slightly, it doesn't travel far. If it rests briefly, it doesn't settle deeply. There's no force encouraging either movement. Everything stays balanced on its own. The voice remains part of this balance. It doesn't guide attention back or hold it in place. It continues steadily, allowing nothing to pull attention away from the calm, uninterrupted flow of the night. As the night carries on, attention stays where it is, not because it's being held, but because nothing is asking it to move. The flow remains smooth and undisturbed, and the voice remains with it, steady and unchanging. As the night continues, awareness no longer feels like it's moving from one place to another. It doesn't shift towards sounds, and it doesn't pull back into the quiet. It remains steady, without direction or change. The voice continues at the same even pace. It doesn't draw awareness forward, and it doesn't push it away. It stays present in the same calm way, allowing awareness to remain exactly where it is. There's no sense of scanning or checking. Awareness doesn't look around for something to notice. It doesn't pause to see what has changed. Everything feels already included, without needing to be revisited. Sounds pass through without altering awareness. They don't move it closer or farther. When they fade, awareness remains unchanged, resting in the same open space. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't carry awareness with them. A thought doesn't pull awareness into it, and awareness doesn't follow where the thought goes. They pass alongside one another, without interaction. Listening stays effortless. The words don't shift awareness toward meaning or away from it.
They exist within the same steady field, without creating movement. Time continues quietly. Moments don't cause awareness to step forward or fall behind. Everything flows evenly, without prompting awareness to adjust. If awareness rests on something briefly, it doesn't settle there. If it drifts, it doesn't move far.
There's no difference between these moments, and no reason to respond to them. The night holds this stillness naturally. Awareness doesn't need to be guided or stabilized. It remains steady on its own, without effort or correction. The voice continues as part of this steadiness. It doesn't anchor awareness or give it direction. It simply remains present, moving along with the night as awareness stays where it is, unchanged and undisturbed. As the night continues, it feels fully settled, not in a way that signals an ending, and not in a way that announces arrival, but in a quiet sense that nothing is shifting beneath the surface anymore. The voice remains steady, unchanged in tone or pace. It doesn't soften further, and it doesn't become more present. It continues in the same even way, allowing the night to remain as it is. There's no movement that stands out now. Sounds don't ripple through the quiet, and the quiet doesn't deepen or lift. Everything feels placed, not because it has been arranged, but because there's no sense of change left to notice. Thoughts, if they appear, don't disturb this balance. They don't carry weight or direction. They pass lightly, without creating motion, and leave the same stillness behind. Listening feels completely at rest. The words don't move attention, and attention doesn't move toward the words. They exist together in the same settled space, without interaction. Time continues without texture. Moments don't add anything to what's already here. They don't subtract anything either. The night feels complete in each moment, without needing the next one to arrive.
There's no sense of holding or releasing. Nothing needs to be kept in place, and nothing needs to be let go. Everything remains steady on its own. If awareness rests here, it rests without effort. If it drifts slightly, it doesn't change the feeling of the night. Everything stays even, without response. The night holds this settled
State naturally. It doesn't need support and it doesn't need attention. It simply remains quiet and stable. The voice continues as part of this calm foundation. It doesn't mark progress or signal depth. It stays present in the same unobtrusive way, moving alongside the night as it remains fully settled, carrying everything forward without disturbance. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs to change. Not because everything is perfect and not because something has been resolved, but because there's no longer a feeling that adjustment is required.
The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace or tone. It doesn't suggest improvement, and it doesn't hint at moving deeper. It simply continues, allowing the night to stay exactly as it is. Nothing here feels unfinished. Sounds don't ask to be altered, and the quiet doesn't feel incomplete. Everything exists in its current form,
without calling for modification. Thoughts, if they appear, don't carry a desire to shift things. They don't propose solutions or alternatives. They pass through lightly, without creating movement or direction. Listening remains at ease. The words don't invite engagement, and they don't fade away. They stay present as part of the same settled space, without prompting any response. Time continues evenly. Moments don't build towards something else, and they don't suggest that something should be different later. Each moment feels sufficient on its own. There's no urge to hold on or let go. Nothing needs to be kept steady, and nothing needs to be released. Everything remains balanced without effort. If awareness rests here, it doesn't need to settle further. If it drifts slightly, it doesn't create imbalance. The night remains unchanged either way. The night holds this absence of movement naturally. It doesn't resist change, and it doesn't seek it. It simply remains open and stable, without preference. The voice continues as part of this stillness. It doesn't guide or correct. It stays present in the same quiet way, moving alongside the night as nothing needs to change, and nothing asks to. As the night continues, it feels as though it's holding itself without effort. Nothing is keeping it in place, and nothing needs to support it. The quiet remains steady on its own, without being maintained. The voice continues at the same even pace. It doesn't reinforce the calm, and it doesn't protect it. It simply stays present, moving alongside the night as it remains stable by itself, where there's no sense that something might slip or fall away. The night doesn't need to be watched or guided. It holds its shape naturally, without tension or adjustment. Sounds pass through without disturbing this balance. They don't threaten the quiet, and the quiet doesn't absorb them forcefully. Everything remains supported in the same gentle way. Thoughts, if they appear, don't create instability. They don't press against the calm or pull away from it. They pass lightly, leaving the same settled space behind. Listening feels supported without effort. The words don't need to be held in attention, and attention doesn't need to rest on them. Everything stays where it is, without slipping. Time continues without pressure. Moments don't require continuity, and they don't need to be connected. Each one is held as it appears, without relying on the next. There's no need to remain alert, and no need to sink further. The night doesn't move in either direction. It simply stays, steady and self-contained. If awareness rests here, it doesn't need to anchor itself. If it drifts slightly, the night remains unchanged. Nothing depends on awareness to keep this balance. The night holds itself quietly. It doesn't ask for attention or effort. It remains open and stable, carrying everything within it without strain. The voice continues as part of this self-supporting calm. It doesn't stabilize the night, and it doesn't follow it. It simply remains present, moving alongside the night as it holds itself, evenly and without interruption. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs support. Nothing is being held up, and nothing is resting on something else. Everything simply exists, steady on its own. The voice remains even and unchanging. It doesn't offer reassurance, and it doesn't suggest stability. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without adding weight or direction. There's no pressure underneath what's happening. Sounds don't lean on the quiet, and the quiet doesn't need to carry them. They pass through freely, without depending on anything to stay in place. Thoughts, if they appear, don't ask to be supported. They don't need attention to hold them together. They come lightly and leave lightly, without leaving anything behind. Listening doesn't require effort or structure. The words don't need to be followed, and they don't need to be ignored. They move through as part of the same open space, without resting on understanding or focus. Time continues without strain. Moments don't stack or rely on one another. Each moment stands on its own, complete without the next one needing to arrive. There's no sense of leaning forward or sinking back. Nothing needs balance, and nothing needs correction. The night remains exactly where it is, without support and without instability. If awareness rests here, it doesn't hold anything in place. If it drifts, nothing collapses. The night doesn't depend on awareness to remain steady. Everything feels light, not because it's floating, but because it isn't being carried. There's no effort involved in staying as you are. The night holds nothing and needs nothing held. It remains open and stable, without tension or reliance. The voice continues as part of this ease, present without supporting or being supported, moving along quietly as the night carries itself forward, unchanged. As the night continues, it feels as though nothing is needed at all. There's no sense of something missing, and no feeling that something should arrive. The night isn't waiting, and it isn't expecting anything. The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace. It doesn't fill a gap, and it doesn't respond to a need. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without offering or taking anything. Nothing here asks for completion. Sounds don't seek silence, and silence doesn't wait for sound. They exist without depending on one another, complete as they are. Thoughts, if they appear, don't come from a need to solve or understand. They don't suggest improvement or movement. They pass through lightly, without carrying a sense of lack. Listening feels effortless. The words don't serve a purpose, and they don't need one. They move through the same open space as everything else, without trying to do anything. Time continues without direction. Moments don't point forward, and they don't refer back. Each moment stands on its own, not as a step, but as a complete presence. There's no urge to stay, and no urge to leave. Nothing needs to be held in place, and nothing needs to be released. The night remains balanced without effort. If awareness rests here, it doesn't rest on anything. If it drifts, it doesn't move away from anything. There's no reference point that needs to be maintained. The night feels whole without being assembled. It doesn't require support, change, or attention. It simply is, steady and open. The voice continues as part of this completeness. It doesn't add meaning or remove it. It remains present without purpose.
moving along with the night as nothing is needed.
Nothing is missing, and nothing asks to be different. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything is being sought. Nothing is looking ahead, and nothing is checking behind. The night isn't searching for calm, and it isn't moving away from noise. Everything remains exactly where it is. The voice continues at the same steady pace. It doesn't point toward something to find, and it doesn't suggest that anything has been found. It stays present without direction, moving quietly alongside the night. There's no movement toward understanding, and no movement away from confusion. Nothing needs to be clarified, and nothing needs to be left behind. The night doesn't measure progress,
and it doesn't ask where you are. Thoughts, if they appear, don't feel like questions. They don't reach for answers or hint at something unresolved. They pass through lightly, without pulling attention forward. Listening remains effortless. The words don't lead anywhere, and they don't invite attention to follow.
They exist as a part of the same open space, without creating a sense of purpose. Time continues without orientation. Moments don't feel closer to anything, and they don't feel farther away. They arrive and pass without suggesting that something is being approached. There's no sense of searching inward or outward. Nothing is being scanned, and nothing is being avoided. Awareness doesn't lean toward anything, and it doesn't pull back. If attention rests briefly on a sound or a word, it doesn't turn into pursuit. If it drifts, nothing is lost. The night doesn't respond differently. Everything feels complete without effort. Not because something has been found, but because nothing was missing to begin with. The night remains open and steady, without expectation. The voice continues as part of this stillness. It doesn't guide or reassure. It stays present without aim, moving along with the night as nothing is being sought. Nothing is approaching, and nothing needs to be reached. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs to be held in place. Nothing is slipping, and nothing is about to fall away. There's no reason to keep anything close, and no reason to let anything go. The voice remains steady, unchanged in its pace. It doesn't ask you to stay with it, and it doesn't move away. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without needing to be followed. Thoughts, if they appear, don't need to be kept. They don't require attention to remain, and they don't disappear when attention moves elsewhere. They pass through lightly, without asking to be held or remembered. Sounds move in the same way.
A sound doesn't need to be caught before it fades, and silence doesn't need to be filled. Everything comes and goes without effort, without consequence. Listening feels loose and open. The words don't ask to be gathered, and they don't scatter when they aren't noticed. They move through as part of the same open space,
without creating attachment. Time continues without needing continuity. Moments don't depend on one another. Nothing needs to be carried from one moment into the next. Each moment arrives complete and leaves nothing behind. There's no sense of gripping or releasing. Nothing is being secured, and nothing is being dropped. The night remains stable without any act of holding. If awareness rests briefly on something, it doesn't stay there. If it moves away, nothing is lost. There's no difference between staying and moving, because nothing is being kept in place. The night holds nothing and needs nothing held. It remains open and balanced,
without strain or effort. Everything is free to appear and disappear without needing support. The voice continues as part of this openness. It doesn't anchor anything. and it doesn't require anchoring. It stays present without holding or being held, moving along with the night as nothing needs to be kept, nothing needs to be carried,
and nothing needs to remain. As the night continues, everything feels free to pass through. Nothing needs to pause, and nothing needs to stay. There's no barrier holding things back, and no pull asking them to remain. The voice continues at the same steady pace. It doesn't slow to hold a moment, and it doesn't move quickly to move past it. It remains present, allowing everything to pass without interference. Thoughts, if they appear, don't linger. They don't need permission to arrive, and they don't need encouragement to leave. They pass through gently, without leaving a trace behind. Sounds move in the same way. A sound arises, exists briefly, and fades. It doesn't interrupt what's already there, and it doesn't take anything with it when it goes. The quiet remains unchanged. Listening doesn't tighten or loosen. The words don't need to be followed, and they don't need to be ignored. They pass through as part of the same open space, without being held or resisted. Time continues without accumulation. Moments don't build on one another, and they don't stack up. Each moment passes freely, complete on its own, without carrying weight forward. There's no need to allow or disallow what appears. Everything already has room to move through. Nothing needs to be accepted, and nothing needs to be released. If attention rests briefly on something, it doesn't slow its passing. If attention moves away, it doesn't speed it up. Everything continues at its own pace, unaffected. The night feels open and unobstructed. There's no sense of containment and no sense of escape. Everything moves through the same space, freely and without consequence. The voice continues as part of this openness. It doesn't guide the passing, and it doesn't follow it. It remains steady and present, moving alongside the night as everything is free to pass. Nothing is held back, and nothing is required to remain. As the night continues, it does so without intention. Nothing is moving toward an end, and nothing is circling back to a beginning. It simply goes on, quietly and evenly, without needing a reason. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't introduce anything new, and it doesn't return to what came before. It continues alongside the night without marking time or direction. There's no sense of progression now. One moment doesn't build on the last, and the next doesn't promise anything different. Each moment arrives complete, then passes without leaving a trace. Sounds appear and fade in the same way. They don't interrupt what's already here, and they don't signal change when they leave. The quiet remains the same, uninterrupted and open. Thoughts, if they pass through, don't gather or dissolve in any particular way. They don't suggest movement, and they don't hold attention. They come and go as part of the same continuous flow. Listening feels effortless and unremarkable. The words don't guide, and they don't recede. They remain present in the same gentle way, without asking to be noticed or ignored. Time continues without shape. It doesn't stretch or compress. It doesn't advance or pause. It simply continues, quietly and consistently, without asking to be tracked. There's no sense of staying here or going elsewhere. Nothing needs to be maintained, and nothing needs to be released. The night remains exactly where it is, continuing on its own. If awareness rests here, it rests without settling. If it drifts, it doesn't move away. There's no change in either case. Everything stays even and undisturbed. The night simply continues. It doesn't deepen, and it doesn't fade. It remains open and steady, carrying everything along without effort.
The voice continues with it, unchanged and unobtrusive, moving alongside the night as it goes on in the same calm way, without arrival, without departure, simply continuing. As the night continues, there's no moment that stands out
from the rest. Nothing marks the passage from one instant to the next. Each moment blends into the one before it and the one after it, without separation. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't pause to acknowledge a moment, and it doesn't move on from one. It continues evenly, allowing time to pass without markers. There's no sense of now replacing them. Moments don't arrive with clarity, and they don't depart with notice. They simply pass through, quietly and without definition. Sounds appear without announcing themselves. When they fade, they don't leave a space behind. The quiet that remains feels exactly the same, uninterrupted and open. Thoughts, if they arise, don't mark time either. They don't signal that something has happened or that something is about to happen. They pass through without leaving a trace that needs to be noticed. Listening feels neutral and steady. The words don't form landmarks, and they don't divide the night into parts. They move along as part of the same continuous flow. Time doesn't present itself as a series of moments anymore. It feels smooth and unbroken, without points that stand out or require attention. If awareness rests on something briefly, it doesn't create a moment. If it drifts, it doesn't leave one behind. Nothing changes either way. The night holds this continuity naturally. It doesn't highlight beginnings or endings. Everything remains evenly spaced, without contrast or emphasis. The voice continues as part of this sameness. It doesn't identify moments or pass judgment on them. It remains present and unobtrusive, moving alongside the night as nothing marks the moment, nothing divides time, and everything continues in the same calm, uninterrupted way. As the night continues, time no longer draws attention to itself. It doesn't feel like it's moving forward, and it doesn't feel like it's standing still. It simply isn't noticed. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't mark time passing, and it doesn't suggest how long anything has been here. It continues evenly, without reference. There's no sense of minutes or hours unfolding. Nothing measures how long the night has lasted, and nothing checks how much remains. Time doesn't present itself as something to be followed. Sounds appear and fade without being placed in time. They don't feel earlier or later. They don't arrive on schedule or leave behind a sense of duration. The quiet that follows feels the same as before. Thoughts, if they arise, don't connect to a timeline. They don't refer back, and they don't point ahead. They pass through without anchoring themselves to any moment. Listening remains simple and unmarked. The words don't create a sequence, and they don't suggest progression. They move through steadily, without forming a sense of before or after. Time feels smooth and undefined. It doesn't stretch or compress. It doesn't move in steps. It remains open, without shape or direction. If awareness rests briefly on something, it doesn't turn into the moment in time. If it drifts, it doesn't leave time behind. Nothing changes in either case. The night carries on without signaling duration. Everything that appears belongs equally, without being placed along a line of time. The voice continues as part of this openness. It doesn't locate you in time, and it doesn't move you through it. It stays present and unobtrusive, moving alongside the night as time is no longer noticed, no longer counted, and no longer required for anything to continue.
As the night continues, it no longer feels like it has edges. There's no place where it begins, and no place where it ends. It doesn't open into something else, and it doesn't close around anything. It simply remains. The voice continues at the same steady pace. It doesn't come from a particular direction,
and it doesn't move toward one. It exists within the night, without standing apart from it. There's no sense of inside or outside now. Sounds don't enter the night, and they don't leave it. They appear within the same open space and fade without crossing any boundary. Thoughts, if they arise, don't come from anywhere specific. They don't go anywhere either. They pass through without touching an edge, without creating a division between before and after. Listening doesn't feel located. The words aren't heard from a distance, and they aren't close. They don't occupy a position. They move through the same open space as everything else.
Time doesn't form a line or a circle. It doesn't surround the night and it doesn't run through it. It simply isn't defined enough to create borders. If awareness rests here, it doesn't find a boundary to settle against. If it drifts, it doesn't move beyond anything. There's no transition from one area to another, because there are no
areas to move between. The night feels open in every direction, not expanding and not contained. It doesn't offer an edge to approach or a center to return to. Everything exists evenly, without shape. The voice remains part of this openness. It doesn't outline the night, and it doesn't trace its limits. It stays present without marking space or position. As the night has no edges, there's nothing to cross and nothing to reach. Everything that appears belongs immediately, without entering or leaving. The night continues in this open way, and the voice continues with it, steady and unobtrusive, without boundary,
without division, simply remaining. As the night continues, there's no clear sign of anything being controlled. Nothing appears to be guided, and nothing seems to be adjusted. The night unfolds in the same quiet way, without direction or correction. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't guide the night forward,
and it doesn't hold it in place. It continues alongside what's already happening, without intervening. There's no sense of monitoring. Nothing is being checked to see if it's working, and nothing is being measured to see if it's enough. The night doesn't ask for supervision, and it doesn't respond to it. Sounds come and go without being managed. They don't need to be softened or ignored. When they fade, nothing replaces them. The quiet that follows doesn't feel planned or maintained. It simply remains. Thoughts may still pass through, but they don't feel directed. They don't arrive with a purpose, and they don't move toward an outcome. They appear briefly, then dissolve, without being steered. Listening stays neutral. The words don't lead attention anywhere, and attention doesn't need to stay with them. They pass through as part of the same open flow, without needing to be held or followed. Time continues without coordination. Moments don't line up or fall into order. They don't need to be arranged. The night doesn't move faster or slower in response to anything. There's no effort behind what's happening. Nothing is pushing the night forward, and nothing is holding it back. The sense of activity remains, but without a hand guiding it. If awareness rests here, it doesn't rest on anything in particular. If it drifts, it doesn't move away from something important. Nothing depends on awareness staying in place. The night feels stable without being stabilized. It doesn't require attention to keep its balance, and it doesn't change when attention shifts. Everything continues on its own.
The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't replace control, and it doesn't comment on its absence. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as the night carries on without anything actively directing it. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything is being managed.
Nothing is being kept on track, and nothing is being watched to make sure it stays that way. The night moves on without oversight. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't organize what's happening, and it doesn't respond to it either. It continues alongside the night without taking responsibility for how things unfold. There's no feeling of checking in. Nothing is being reviewed, and nothing is being adjusted. The night doesn't pause to see how it's going, and it doesn't wait for confirmation before continuing. Sounds appear without being handled. They aren't softened or filtered. When they pass, nothing fills the space that they leave. The quiet that remains doesn't feel maintained. It simply stays. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't feel supervised. They don't need to be guided into shape, and they don't need to be redirected. They come and go without anyone keeping track. Listening remains neutral. The words don't require attention to function, and attention doesn't need to stay with them. They pass through evenly, without being managed or organized. Time continues without coordination. Moments don't line up neatly, and they don't fall out of order. Nothing is making sure they arrive on schedule. They simply pass. There's no sense of effort behind what's happening. Nothing is trying to keep things calm, and nothing is preventing them from changing. The night continues freely, without intervention. If awareness rests somewhere briefly, it isn't placed there. If it drifts, it isn't corrected. Nothing steps in to guide it back. Everything remains allowed. The night feels stable without being maintained. It doesn't depend on attention to keep its balance, and it doesn't shift when attention moves. The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't take on the role of managing the night, and it doesn't replace what's absent. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as the night carries on without anything being managed, and without anything needing to be. As the night continues, effort doesn't disappear, but it no longer feels active. It doesn't push anything forward, and it doesn't hold anything in place. It simply steps aside, without announcement. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't encourage effort, and it doesn't remove it. It continues alongside the night, allowing effort to no longer be involved. There's no sense of trying to stay calm, and no sense of trying to go deeper. Nothing is being done to keep things steady, and nothing is being done to change them. The night continues without needing that kind of participation. Sounds arise without being met by effort. They don't need to be listened to carefully, and they don't need to be ignored. They appear, exist briefly, and fade, without effort stepping in. Thoughts may still pass through, but they aren't being worked with. They aren't being shaped, improved, or followed. They come and go without effort touching them. Listening remains easy. The words don't require attention to stay present, and attention doesn't require effort to rest where it is. Everything moves along naturally, without strain. Time continues without being managed by effort. Moments don't need to be used well or held carefully. They pass without being handled, without effort staying involved. There's no subtle tension behind what's happening. Nothing is trying to keep things on track, and nothing is preventing them from drifting. The night remains balanced without effort maintaining it. If awareness rests briefly somewhere, it doesn't do so because of effort. If it drifts, effort doesn't pull it back.
Nothing is corrected, and nothing needs to be. The night feels steady on its own. It doesn't rely on effort to stay that way. Everything continues without being held together. The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't replace effort, and it doesn't comment on its absence.
It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as effort quietly steps aside and the night carries on without it. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs to be directed. Nothing is being steered, and nothing is being pointed toward a particular place. The flow moves on without guidance. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't suggest a direction, and it doesn't remove one. It continues quietly, alongside the night and without taking the role of leading. There's no feeling of choosing a path. Nothing needs to go deeper, and nothing needs to stay where it is. The night doesn't require orientation.
It unfolds without needing to be guided forward or kept back. Sounds appear without being directed toward attention. They don't ask to be noticed, and they don't need to be set aside. They arise and fade on their own, without being guided or redirected. Thoughts may still pass through, but they don't feel like signals pointing somewhere.
They don't suggest next steps, and they don't require response. They appear briefly, then dissolve, without direction shaping them. Listening remains neutral. The words don't guide attention inward or outward. They don't indicate a place to arrive or a state to reach. They pass through evenly, without directing anything. Time continues without needing alignment. Moments don't need to be arranged, and they don't need to be placed in order. The night doesn't move according to a plan. It simply continues. There's no subtle pressure to stay on course. Nothing is being corrected, and nothing is being guided back. The night remains stable without direction holding it together. If awareness rests briefly somewhere, it isn't guided there. If it drifts, it isn't redirected. Nothing steps in to adjust its position. Everything remains allowed. The night feels open and self-moving. It doesn't require a hand to guide it, and it doesn't lose balance without one. Everything continues naturally. The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't direct the night, and it doesn't replace direction. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as nothing needs to be directed and nothing asks to be. As the night continues, the absence of control doesn't feel like something is missing. Nothing has been taken away, and nothing needs to be replaced. Everything feels complete without anything needing to oversee it. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't step in to fill a gap, and it doesn't suggest that something needs to be restored. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without compensating for anything. There's no sense of loss here. The night doesn't feel unsupported, and it doesn't feel exposed. Everything continues as it is, without the need for control to be present. Sounds arise and fade without leaving a gap behind them. When they pass, the quiet that remains doesn't feel empty or unfinished. It feels whole, without requiring anything else. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't arrive with a sense that something should be managed. They don't suggest that direction has been lost. They pass through lightly, without creating concern. Listening remains easy. The words don't take on responsibility, and they don't step into a role. They pass through as part of the same open space, without trying to stabilize or guide. Time continues without supervision. Moments don't need to be kept in order, and they don't fall apart without control. They pass smoothly, without leaving anything undone. There's no need to replace what isn't here.
The night doesn't feel like it needs a hand on it. Everything remains steady without effort, without direction, and without oversight. If awareness rests here, it doesn't sense absence. If it drifts, nothing feels lost. There's no reference point missing, and no structure collapsing. The night feels intact on its own.
It doesn't require control to hold together, and it doesn't change when control isn't present. The voice continues as part of this completeness. It doesn't reassure, and it doesn't explain. It simply remains, steady and unobtrusive, as control is not missing, nothing is lacking, and the night continues fully as it is. As the night continues, nothing takes over. There's no force stepping in, and no shift that replaces what was already here. Everything remains as it is, without being overtaken by anything else. The voice continues at the same steady pace. It doesn't assert itself, and it doesn't withdraw. It stays present without becoming dominant, allowing the night to continue without interruption. There's no sense of being carried away. Nothing pulls the night in a new direction, and nothing overrides what's happening. The calm doesn't deepen suddenly, and it doesn't turn into something unfamiliar. Sounds appear without taking control of the space. They don't overwhelm the quiet, and they don't reshape it. When they pass, the night remains unchanged. Thoughts, if they arise, don't seize attention. They don't take over awareness or demand response. They pass through lightly, without gaining influence or weight. Listening remains balanced. The words don't take charge, and they don't disappear. They move through evenly, without becoming the center of experience. Time continues without momentum. Moments don't push the night forward, and they don't pull it away. Nothing accelerates, and nothing slows beyond what's already happening.
There's no sense of entering another state. The night doesn't shift into something deeper or different. It remains steady, all without transition or takeover. If awareness rests here, it isn't absorbed by anything. If it drifts, it isn't drawn into something else. Everything stays open and neutral, without force.
The night feels safe in its continuity. Nothing replaces what was present before, and nothing claims control. Everything remains evenly balanced. The voice continues as part of this steadiness. It doesn't lead, and it doesn't follow. It remains present without taking over, moving alongside the night as nothing takes control, nothing dominates, and nothing needs to. As the night continues, there's no sense that rest needs to be approved. Nothing is waiting for a signal, and nothing is checking whether it's allowed. Rest doesn't arrive through permission. It simply remains present without being announced.
The voice stays steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't invite rest, and it doesn't grant it. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without taking on the role of allowing anything to happen. There's no moment where a decision needs to be made, no point where something must be agreed to before it can settle. The night doesn't pause for consent, and it doesn't move forward because of it. Rest doesn't need to be started. It doesn't need to be entered. It doesn't wait for readiness. It exists in the same way the night exists, without requiring acknowledgement. Sounds pass through without asking whether it's time to rest. When they fade, the quiet that remains doesn't signal permission. It simply stays, complete on its own. Thoughts may still drift by, but they don't need to approve or disapprove of what's happening. They don't authorize rest, and they don't prevent it. They pass without being involved. Listening remains neutral. The words don't open a door, and they don't close one. They move through as part of the same open space, without granting access or withholding it. Time continues without waiting for a cue. Moments don't arrive because permission was given, and they don't pause because it wasn't. Everything continues evenly, without condition.
There's no sense of needing to allow yourself to rest. That idea doesn't need to be addressed or resolved. It simply loses relevance without effort. If awareness rests here, it doesn't do so because it was permitted. If it drifts, nothing is taken away. Rest isn't something that comes and goes based on agreement. The night holds this naturally. It doesn't ask for approval, and it doesn't require it. Everything continues quietly, without needing to be allowed. The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't give permission, and it doesn't take it back. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as rest no longer needs permission.
And nothing is waiting to be granted. As the night continues, the sense of needing to prepare begins to fade. There's nothing left to get ready, and nothing waiting to be arranged. The night doesn't require conditions before it settles. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't suggest readiness.
And it doesn't wait for it. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without asking for anything to be completed first. There's no checklist to move through. Nothing needs to be finished, adjusted, or put in place. The night doesn't pause while preparation happens. It continues whether preparation is present or not. Rest doesn't depend on being ready. It doesn't arrive after a certain state is reached. It doesn't wait for things to line up. It's already here, without requiring steps to lead into it. Sounds pass through without needing the space to be prepared for them. When they fade, the quiet that remains doesn't feel staged or maintained. It simply stays, unplanned and complete. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't need to organize anything. They don't prepare the way for rest, and they don't delay it. They pass through without being involved. Listening remains neutral. The words don't signal that something is about to happen, and they don't close off what came before. They move through steadily, without setting anything up. Time continues without waiting for readiness. Moments don't hold back until something is done. They arrive and pass in the same quiet way, without checking whether preparation is finished. There's no need to feel settled first. That idea doesn't need to be addressed or resolved. It simply loses importance without effort. If awareness rests here, it doesn't do so because preparation is complete. If it drifts, nothing is undone. Rest doesn't depend on readiness to remain. The night holds this naturally. It doesn't ask to be prepared for, and it doesn't respond to preparation. Everything continues without condition. The voice remains part of this ease. It doesn't guide preparation, and it doesn't replace it. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as there is nothing left to prepare, and nothing waiting to begin. As the night continues, the body is not being asked to do anything. There are no instructions waiting for it, and no expectations placed upon it. It isn't invited to relax, and it isn't reminded to settle. It's simply here, without being addressed. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't turn toward the body, and it doesn't turn away. It continues alongside the night, and it's without directing attention inward or outward. There's no need to check how the body feels. Nothing requires confirmation. Sensations don't need to be noticed, and they don't need to be adjusted. Whatever is present is allowed to remain without response. The night doesn't request stillness, and it doesn't encourage movement. It doesn't wait for the body to change in order to continue. Everything unfolds without asking the body to cooperate. Sounds pass through without prompting a reaction.
They don't invite tension, and they don't release it. They appear and fade without requiring the body to respond in any way. Thoughts may drift by, but they don't turn toward the body
with suggestions. They don't ask for release or softness. They pass through without involving the body at all. Listening remains neutral. The words don't point to posture or position. They don't suggest how the body should be. They move through steadily without addressing the body directly. Time continues without reference to physical state. Moments don't wait for comfort, and they don't react to discomfort. They pass quietly, without asking anything of the body. There's no sense that the body needs to be included or excluded. It doesn't need attention to function, and it doesn't change when attention moves elsewhere. It continues doing what it does naturally. If awareness rests here, it doesn't rest on the body. If it drifts, the body isn't left behind. Nothing depends on awareness to manage what's happening. The night holds this ease naturally. The body isn't guided, and it isn't corrected. It remains part of the night without being asked to participate. The voice continues as part of this quiet allowance. It doesn't instruct the body, and it doesn't wait for it. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as the body is not being asked, and nothing needs to be done. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs to be released. Nothing is being held tightly, and nothing is waiting to be let go. There's no action required for things to settle. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't encourage letting go, and it doesn't suggest holding on. It continues quietly, alongside the night, without prompting any movement.
There's no pressure building that needs relief. Nothing feels compressed, and nothing feels restrained. What's present doesn't need space to open up. It already exists without tension. Sounds pass through without being freed from anything. They don't feel trapped, and they don't need to be released into the quiet.
They appear and fade naturally, without effort. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't feel like burdens. They don't ask to be dropped, and they don't need to be cleared away. They pass lightly, without carrying weight. Listening remains neutral. The words don't suggest an action to take, and they don't complete an action that has begun. They move through steadily, without creating a need to release anything. Time continues without accumulation. Moments don't pile up, and they don't press against one another. Nothing needs to be emptied or cleared for the night to continue. There's no sense of loosening required. Nothing needs to soften in order to rest. The night doesn't wait for release before it settles further. It continues as it is. If awareness rests here, it doesn't release anything. If it drifts, nothing is left behind. There's no difference between holding and releasing, because nothing is being held in the first place. The night holds this ease naturally. It doesn't tighten, and it doesn't ask to be loosened. Everything remains open without effort. The voice continues as part of this quiet balance. It doesn't guide release, and it doesn't follow it. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as nothing needs to be released, nothing needs to be done, and the night carries on, without requiring any action at all. As the night continues, rest doesn't feel like something that needs to begin. There's no moment where it starts, and no signal that announces its arrival. It's already present, without having been introduced. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't initiate rest, and it doesn't deepen it. It continues quietly,
alongside the night, without marking any transition. There's no sense of crossing into rest. Nothing shifts from active to quiet. What's happening now doesn't replace what came before. It simply continues in
The same gentle way. Sounds pass through without interrupting this ease. When they fade, nothing changes. The quiet that remains feels familiar, not newly arrived. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't interrupt rest. They don't pull attention away from it, and they don't delay it. They pass through as part of the same settled flow. Listening remains neutral. The words don't create rest, and they don't complete it. They move through steadily, without becoming a signal or a cue. Time continues without marking a shift. Moments don't indicate that rest has begun, and they don't suggest it's about to. Everything continues evenly, without a before or after. There's no need to recognize rest for it to be present. It doesn't depend on awareness noticing it. It remains whether it's observed or not. If awareness rests here, it doesn't arrive at rest. If it drifts, rest doesn't disappear. Nothing changes either way, because rest isn't something that comes and goes. The night holds this naturally. It doesn't create rest and it doesn't maintain it. It simply continues in the same settled way. The voice remains part of this continuity. It doesn't announce rest, and it doesn't point it out. It continues steadily, unobtrusive, as rest is already happening, without beginning, without ending, and without needing to be noticed. As the night continues, there's no sense that anything needs to be maintained. Nothing is being held together, and nothing is being kept in place. What's present doesn't require effort to remain as it is. The voice stays steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't support what's happening, and it doesn't prevent it from changing. It continues quietly, alongside the night and without taking responsibility for how things continue. There's no pressure to keep rest going. Nothing needs to be preserved, and nothing needs to be protected. The night doesn't rely on attention to stay settled. Sounds pass through without altering what's already here. When they fade, nothing needs to be restored. The quiet remains without needing to be sustained. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't disrupt anything that needs to be kept. They don't threaten rest, and they don't require correction. They pass through lightly, without consequence. Listening remains neutral. The words don't maintain calm, and they don't prevent change. They move through as part of the same open space, without holding anything in place. Time continues without upkeep. Moments don't require continuity to make sense. Nothing needs to be carried from one moment to the next. There's no concern about losing what's here are. Nothing is fragile, and nothing depends on careful attention. The night continues on its own, without being watched. If awareness rests here, it doesn't keep anything steady. If it drifts, nothing falls apart. The state of rest doesn't depend on being noticed or maintained. The night feels self-sustaining. It doesn't require assistance, and it doesn't respond to effort. Everything remains open and balanced without intervention. The voice continues as part of this ease. It doesn't maintain rest, and it doesn't guard it. It simply continues, steady and unobtrusive, as nothing needs to be maintained, nothing needs to be held, and the night carries on without requiring anything at all. As the night continues, it does so without changing its character. Nothing becomes quieter than before, and nothing becomes more still. The night remains exactly as it is, continuing in the same even way. The voice stays steady,
unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't signal a transition, and it doesn't introduce a new phase. It continues alongside the night without shifting what's already happening. There's no sense of moving into something deeper. The night doesn't open into another layer, and it doesn't close around anything.
It simply remains present, without developing or fading. Sounds appear as they have been appearing. When they pass, the space they leave feels the same as it did before. Nothing accumulates and nothing dissolves into something else. Thoughts, if they arise, don't indicate change. They don't suggest progress or movement. They pass through lightly, without altering the tone of the night. Listening remains neutral and unremarkable. The words don't guide the night forward, and they don't hold it where it is. They move through steadily, without marking a shift. Time continues without emphasis. Moments don't feel longer or shorter. They don't signal that
Something has settled further. They pass in the same quiet way, without distinction. There's no sense of entering rest more fully. Nothing settles into a deeper place, and nothing lifts out of where it was. The night remains evenly present, without direction. If awareness rests here, it doesn't find anything new. If it drifts,
nothing changes. The night doesn't respond differently. Everything remains the same. The night continues without effort and without change. It doesn't require support, and it doesn't move toward an outcome. It simply goes on, steady and open. The voice continues with it, unobtrusive and even, without introducing difference or depth, as the night carries on exactly as it is, unchanged and unmarked. So as the night continues, it doesn't become more quiet. Nothing softens further, and nothing fades away completely. The quiet that's here doesn't deepen or expand. It simply remains as it is. The voice stays steady, unchanged in pace.
it doesn't lower itself, and it doesn't recede. It continues evenly, alongside the night, without shaping the soundscape. But there's no sense of the world settling down further. Sounds don't gradually disappear, and silence doesn't spread. What's present stays present, without drifting toward stillness. A sound may appear briefly,
then fade. When it does, the quiet that remains isn't thicker or thinner than before. It feels the same, without progression. Thoughts, if they arise, don't grow softer or quieter. They don't need to dissolve into silence. They pass through in the same simple way, without changing the tone of the night. Listening remains neutral. The words don't quiet the space, and they don't disturb it. They move through steadily, without making the night calmer or less calm. Time continues without softening. Moments don't slow into stillness, and they don't blur into silence. They pass evenly,
without becoming more quiet as they go. There's no sense that quiet is increasing. Nothing is moving toward silence, and nothing is moving away from it. The night remains balanced, without change. If awareness rests here, it doesn't find deeper quiet. If it drifts, nothing becomes louder. The night responds in the same way, without variation.
Everything continues at the same level. Quiet doesn't intensify, and sound doesn't retreat. There's no direction toward less or more. The night remains open and even. It doesn't refine itself into silence, and it doesn't need to. It simply continues. The voice continues with it, steady and unobtrusive, without making anything more quiet, without asking for silence. As the night carries on exactly as it is, unchanged and unaltered. As the night continues, awareness isn't following anything. It isn't tracking the voice, and it isn't moving with the words. It isn't keeping pace, and it isn't drifting behind. It simply remains, without attaching itself to anything in particular. The voice stays steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't ask awareness to stay with it, and it doesn't move ahead of it. It continues evenly, without becoming an object to follow. There's no sense of attention moving from one thing to another. Awareness doesn't shift when a sound appears, and it doesn't turn away when the sound fades. Nothing pulls it forward, and nothing leaves it behind. Thoughts, if they arise, aren't followed. Awareness doesn't go along with them, and it doesn't stay behind when they pass. They appear briefly, then dissolve, without awareness needing to move. Listening remains loose and uncommitted. The words don't lead awareness anywhere, and awareness doesn't hold on to them. They pass through without being tracked. Time continues without being observed. Awareness doesn't move with moments as they pass, and it doesn't mark their arrival or departure. Everything continues without being followed. There's no sense of staying present with anything. Awareness isn't resting on a sound, a thought, or the quiet. It isn't leaving anything either. It remains open, without direction. If awareness seems to pause briefly, it isn't pausing on something. If it seems to drift, it isn't drifting away from something. There's no reference point involved. The night doesn't require awareness to follow it. It continues on its own, without needing to be observed or accompanied. Nothing needs to be kept in view. Nothing needs to be monitored. Awareness doesn't need to stay close or move away. Everything remains allowed. The voice continues as part of this openness. It doesn't guide awareness, and it doesn't replace what awareness might follow. It remains present without becoming an object, as awareness is not following anything, and the night continues evenly and without direction. As the night continues, it feels held without any sense of depth. Nothing is being drawn inward, and nothing is sinking. The night doesn't surround or contain. It simply remains steady, without direction. The voice stays even, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't add weight, and it doesn't create space. It continues alongside the night, without suggesting closeness or distance. There's no feeling of being carried into something deeper. Nothing opens beneath what's happening, and nothing settles below the surface. The night holds everything exactly where it already is. Sounds appear and fade without changing this steadiness. They don't echo into depth, and they don't float on the surface. They pass through the same open space, without creating layers. Thoughts, if they arise, don't move inward. They don't drift down or away. They appear briefly, then pass, without changing the sense of being held. Listening remains neutral. The words don't create an inner space, and they don't fill one. They move through evenly, without depth or distance. Time continues without dimension. Moments don't stack or sink. They don't lead into something below or above. They pass in the same flat, open way. There's no sense of support coming from underneath. Nothing is being upheld, and nothing is being suspended. The night doesn't rely on structure to remain steady. If awareness rests here, it doesn't settle into anything. If it drifts, it doesn't move away from support. Nothing changes either way. The night holds without effort and without depth. It doesn't gather or surround. It simply remains stable, without pressure or pull. The voice continues as part of this steadiness. It doesn't anchor or contain. It stays present and unobtrusive, as the night holds without depth, without direction, and without needing to be understood. As the night continues, nothing needs to be let go, and nothing needs to be held. There's no sense of release, and no sense of keeping. Nothing is tightening, and nothing is loosening. Everything simply remains. The voice stays steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't invite letting go, and it doesn't suggest holding on. It continues evenly, without pointing toward either movement. There's no action taking place beneath what's happening. Nothing is being dropped, and nothing is being secured. The night doesn't ask for either. It continues without effort or response. Thoughts, if they appear, don't need to be released. They don't need to be carried forward either. They pass through lightly, without becoming something to keep or discard. Sounds move in the same way. A sound doesn't need to be allowed to go, and it doesn't need to be held in place. It appears, then fades, without anything changing because of it. Listening remains neutral. The words don't complete an action, and they don't begin one. They move through steadily, without creating a sense of holding or releasing. Time continues without accumulation. Moments don't build up, and they don't need to be cleared away. Each moment passes freely, without leaving weight behind. There's no sense of effort behind what's happening. Nothing is being managed, adjusted, or balanced. The night doesn't require participation to remain as it is. If awareness rests here, it doesn't rest on anything. If it drifts, it doesn't move away from anything. There's no difference between these movements, because nothing is being held or released. The night remains open without action. It doesn't depend on release to feel lightened, and it doesn't depend on holding to feel stable. Everything remains exactly as it is. The voice continues as part of this stillness. It doesn't guide movement, and it doesn't replace it. It remains present and unobtrusive, as nothing is let go, nothing is held, and the night continues without any need for either. As the night continues, it simply remains. Nothing is added, and nothing is taken away. The night doesn't move toward anything, and it doesn't move away. It stays exactly as it is. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace or tone. It doesn't arrive, and it doesn't depart. It continues as part of the night, without shaping or responding to what's happening. There's no sense of progression here. Nothing unfolds and nothing concludes. The night doesn't develop into something else. It remains present, without direction. Sounds appear and fade without altering this stillness. They don't interrupt, and they don't complete anything. When they pass, the night remains unchanged. Thoughts, if they arise, don't change the quality of what's here. They don't add meaning, and they don't remove it. They pass through lightly, without leaving a trace. Listening remains simple and unmarked. The words don't guide attention, and they don't release it. They move through as part of the same open space, without standing out, and time continues without notice. Moments don't stack, and they don't dissolve into something else. They pass evenly, without creating a sense of before or after. There's no sense of staying or leaving. Nothing needs to remain, and nothing needs to pass. The night doesn't depend on either. It simply stays as it is. If awareness rests here, nothing changes. If it drifts, nothing changes. The night doesn't respond, and it doesn't require response. Everything feels neutral and complete, without effort. Nothing needs to be held in place, and nothing needs to be released. There's no action left to take. The night simply remains. It doesn't signal depth, and it doesn't signal rest. It doesn't open or close. It stays. The voice remains with it, steady and unobtrusive, without marking an end or beginning, as the night simply remains, unchanged, unremarkable, and sufficient as it is. As the night continues, the words begin to matter less. They don't need to be understood, and they don't need to be followed. They continue to appear, but without asking for attention. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't emphasize meaning, and it doesn't slow for clarity. It continues evenly, allowing the words to pass without becoming important. There's no need to listen closely now. Nothing depends on catching a phrase or holding on to a sentence. The words move through in the same gentle way the night does. If meaning forms briefly, it doesn't need to stay. If it fades, nothing is lost. The words don't require interpretation to continue being present. Sounds around the words don't compete with them. The voice doesn't stand apart from the quiet, and the quiet doesn't make the words stand out. Everything blends without effort. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't gather around the words. They don't respond or react. They pass alongside, without connection. Listening becomes simpler, not more focused, and not less, just less involved. The words don't need to land anywhere. They don't need to be remembered. Time continues without reference to what's being said. Moments don't hinge on sentences, and sentences don't mark moments. Everything moves along evenly. If awareness rests here, it doesn't settle on the words. If it drifts, the words don't pull it back. There's no need to stay with them. The night holds this gently. The voice remains present, but its role softens. The words are there, but they no longer carry weight. They continue as sound, as rhythm, as part of the night. Meaning becomes optional. Understanding becomes unnecessary. The voice continues quietly, unobtrusive, as words matter less and less. And the night continues in the same calm way, without needing language to guide it. As the night continues, meaning no longer forms in the usual way. Words still appear, but they don't gather into ideas. They arrive, then pass, without joining together. The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't pause to shape meaning, and it doesn't emphasize connection. It continues evenly, allowing the words to remain separate. There's no sense of sentences building towards something. One phrase doesn't lead into the next. They exist side by side, without direction or conclusion. If meaning begins to appear briefly, it doesn't complete itself. It fades before it settles. Nothing needs to be finished, and nothing needs to be resolved. Listening becomes simpler again. The words don't need to be linked. They don't need to make sense together. They move through lightly, without forming structure. Thoughts may still arise, but they don't organize around the words. They don't interpret or respond. They pass through quietly, without shaping anything. Sounds blend naturally with the voice. There's no distinction between words and the space around them. Everything moves together, without separation. Time continues without reference to meaning. Moments don't align with phrases, and phrases don't mark moments. Everything passes evenly. If awareness rests here, it doesn't assemble anything. If it drifts, nothing unravels. There's no structure to maintain. The night holds this openness without effort. Meaning isn't missing, and it isn't needed. The words continue without carrying information. They remain as sound, as rhythm, as part of the night itself. Understanding no longer forms, and nothing requires it to. The voice continues softly and unobtrusively, as meaning no longer forms. And the night continues without needing words to connect or explain anything at all. As the night continues, language begins to feel more like texture than meaning. The words don't point to anything. They don't explain or describe. They exist as sound, as movement, as a gentle surface within the night.
The voice remains steady, unchanged in pace. It doesn't shape phrases for clarity, and it doesn't pause for understanding. It continues evenly, allowing the words to soften into tone and rhythm. There's no need to listen for content now. The words don't carry messages. They don't form ideas. They move through like a quiet pattern,
without edges. Listening becomes less about hearing and more about presence. The sounds of the words blend with the space around them. They don't stand out, and they don't recede. They simply remain. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't attach to the language. They don't interpret it or respond. They pass through the same open space, without interaction. The voice feels less like speech and more like a steady layer. It doesn't lead attention forward, and it doesn't pull it back. It stays neutral, consistent, unobtrusive. Time continues without reference to what's being said. The words don't mark moments, and moments don't depend on words.
Everything moves together, without distinction. If awareness rests here, it rests within the texture, not on the language. If it drifts, the texture remains unchanged. Nothing needs to be followed. The night holds this softly. Language no longer carries direction or instruction. It becomes part of the background,
like a subtle current that doesn't move anything. The voice continues as sound, not as message. Words pass without forming meaning, without needing to. They remain as texture within the night, steady and unobtrusive, as the night continues in the same calm way, without requiring language to do anything at all. As the night continues, the voice no longer stands apart from it. It doesn't come from a place outside the night, and it doesn't move across it. It exists within the same space, without separation. The voice remains steady,
unchanged in pace. It doesn't rise above the quiet, and it doesn't sink beneath it. It stays level, allowing itself to blend rather than lead. There's no clear edge where the voice begins and the night ends. The sound of words moves through the same open space as everything else. It doesn't interrupt, and it doesn't call attention to itself.
Listening becomes less specific. The voice isn't singled out from the surrounding quiet. It feels like part of the background, like a gentle presence that doesn't need to be identified. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't orient around the voice. They don't follow it, and they don't respond to it. They pass through the same space, without connection. The rhythm of the voice aligns with the rhythm of the night, not in a deliberate way, and not as a pattern to follow. They simply coexist, without contrast. Time continues without distinction between sound and silence. The voice doesn't mark moments, and the quiet doesn't frame the voice. Everything flows together, without emphasis. If awareness rests here, it doesn't locate the voice. If it drifts, the voice doesn't pull it back. There's no focal point to return to. The night holds this evenly. The voice doesn't guide, and it doesn't withdraw. It remains present without standing out. The voice becomes part of the night, not as an addition, and not as a layer above it. It blends softly, unobtrusively, as the night continues in the same calm way, without separation, without distinction, and without needing the voice to be anything more than what it already is. As the night continues, nothing needs to be said. Not because everything has been expressed, and not because something has ended, but because there's no longer a need for words to do anything. The voice remains present, steady and unobtrusive. It doesn't explain, and it doesn't add. It continues quietly, without offering more or taking anything away. There's no message waiting to be delivered.
Nothing is being clarified, and nothing is being concluded. The night doesn't ask for language to continue being what it is. Words may still appear, but they don't carry weight. They don't ask to be heard, and they don't need to be understood. They pass through lightly, without forming direction or meaning. Listening no longer involves attention. The voice doesn't need to be followed, and it doesn't need to be left behind. It exists as part of the same open space, without importance. Time continues without reference to speech. Moments don't depend on words, and words don't shape moments. Everything carries on evenly. Without need for comment, there's no sense of silence arriving, and no sense of speech continuing. Nothing changes. The night remains steady, complete without language guiding it. The voice stays as long as it does, without purpose. And when nothing needs to be said, nothing is missing. The night continues, open and unmarked, without needing words to remain. And as the night continues, sleep arrives in its own time, quietly and without effort.